shaping of public opinion, and unfair hearing, verdicts by anchors. The debates have also replaced the crucial space where citizens and governments meet. It is also the place where consent is manufactured for governments and dissent is isolated and defeated. It is not surprising, therefore, that opposition parties find it more and more difficult to represent the contrary voices on these debates. It is not surprising that the anchors of channels choose to represent the government, where power, influence, and even wealth are located. These have been some of the findings of the popular weekly report cards we bring out from Rate the Debate, which are prepared through painstaking study of the debates of each anchor. Until date, over 4 lakh engagements have taken place with the anchor report cards by people on social media and public domain, and the numbers are always increasing. So here are some points on how the anchors were studied. Number one, every debate was watched to list and mark the topics. Conduct of the debate was evaluated. Number three, anchors' questions and interruptions were noted. Number four, speaking time given to panelists was recorded. Number five, Twitter handle of each anchor was thoroughly assessed. 6, markers of anchors' conduct were tracked. 7, topics of debates were listed. 8, taglines were followed on live shows. 9, Twitter feeds were collected. 10, interruptions were counted for panelists. 11, questions by anchors was analyzed. Until now, 22,000 minutes of debates, over 22,000 minutes of debates have been analyzed by Rate the Debate. 368 hours of debates, 638 debate topics, 8 channels, 11 anchors, and we are still counting. The quantitative analysis, along with the qualitative analysis, covered broadly, as we were discussing before with the panel, anchor, how anchor allocated time, how anchor moderated, balanced, or argued for one side or the other, interruptions, and crosstalk. Here are some of the more interesting conclusions from our debate, and they, I hope, go to structuralize the debate and help reforms. Number one, debates neglect people's issues and urgent problems. This is from the debates we have studied. I do not want to generalize. I'm just saying that the scientific debate, scientific methodology we applied on certain channels yielded these findings. Debates neglect people's issues and urgent problems. 2, debates are about putting up a show than deliberation. 3, debates mostly support government stand and decisions. Number 4, anchors shout down panelists opposed to their view. 5, anchors try for a victory over panelists with contrary opinion. Number 6, anchors discredit dissenting voices of panelists. Number 7, panelists are chosen to support or oppose governments. 8, panelists rarely represent ordinary citizens. 9, panelists against government face flack and insults. 10, few debates supported solutions for people's issues. 11, few debates tried to build bridges or unify. 12, few debates cited examples that upheld constitution. 13, language of debates was abrasive. Language served to silence dissent. Language was deliberately divisive and provocative. Finally, all debates ran media trials. All debates stressed they were exposing the truth, and all debates emphatically fought for the government. Once again, these are only about the debates we studied in our report cards over the period of since August, because it was on August 16th, 2020, that we began this initiative a day after the independence. And this is when we decided that we must restore one of the most important parts of democracy, deliberation and television, back to the people. This is also has been our submission to the Supreme Court, that now that we have a structure, let us think of reforms. We are grateful for the widespread and heartfelt support we have received from people across the country. It feels good to know that there are so many like-minded people looking at the same problems and thinking for solutions. We will continue to reform TV news, which is our motto. Today, we have 3 sessions on some of the most important challenges we have discovered in our research. Session 1 is about neutrality of news. Is it really possible to have neutral news? And if so, how can we achieve it? Session 2, faith in news. The battle between faith and fake news and how to empower people. Session 3, the Hathras coverage. Media can be a powerful weapon if it plays its part. The challenges of covering the Hathras coverage will be discussed in session 3. All sessions are on the record and are being live streamed across Facebook and YouTube. There may be a limitation of the number of audience on Zoom, but viewers can access these sessions on the other platforms. Furthermore, in case you viewers miss these sessions, the recordings will be available online. I'm grateful to the distinguished speakers in each panel who bring to us their vast experience in Indian media and public space. Every session will be followed by Q&A, and I hope that together we will be able to set an agenda for news and television for 2021. My special welcome in the audience to the esteemed faculty and students of Christ University, Bangalore, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi, Aurobindo College, University of Delhi, and students from other universities and campuses. We at the Rate the Debate are a dedicated group of professionals and researchers who are volunteering to taking precious time out for this initiative. I will now hand over the proceedings to one of my colleagues from Rate the Debate, Mr. Saptasindhu Basu, an important member of our research team with a keen interest and dedication to reform TV news in India. Thank you and enjoy the conference.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now we shall have our first session, News and Neutrality. Is bias inevitable? Journalism aspires to rise above bias and report news, present opinions without taking sides. How can this be done? That's what we will talk about in this session. The moderator of this session will be Ms. Saba Naqvi. She is a renowned author, journalist, commentator, and political analyst. She presently writes columns in leading national dailies and news websites. She has also been Reuters Fellow at Oxford University, a Jefferson Fellow at the East-West Center at Hawaii, has been awarded for the Asia Leadership Fellow Award given by the Japan Foundation at Tokyo and the US State Department's Fellowship for Leading Professionals from across the world. I now request Ms. Saba Naqvi to begin the session by introducing the panelists.
Thank you, Basu, and thank you so much, Nilima. I'm absolutely honored to anchor the first debate of this important, significant initiative that you have started. I'm going to introduce the panelists, my co-panelists first, and then I will just give a brief introduction. So both of them are known to me. Both of them have been colleagues and friends, and both are fantastic journalists. Paranjoy's Guha Thakurta's career spans over 4 decades across different media, print, radio, television, and documentary cinema. His main areas of interest are the working of the political economy and media in India and the world, and he has authored, co-authored, and directed, produced documentary films on the topic. He's a well-known face among university campuses across India and is definitely acknowledged as a fearless commentator, because that I have been part of those fearlessly trying to comment in the face of the kind of shouting down, Nilima, that you have just mentioned. Paranjoy, like me, has endured that with us. Priya Sahgal, another great colleague of mine, is a journalist who's actually been able to manage without doing all of that. So good on you, Priya. She's a reputed author and a senior political journalist. She's the senior executive editor at NewsX, and she anchors 2 political shows, The Round Table and Cover Story. She is also a political columnist for the Sunday Guardian and has worked at Sunday, Outlook, and India Today magazine. Indeed, Priya, I've had the pleasure of being on some of her shows, and they're very, very reasonable debates where people actually have a conversation. So I welcome both the panelists. Briefly, I think the introduction that Nilima and Basu have made explains it. So, but the question that I have been asked to engage in the debate with, is bias inevitable? As somebody who also teaches now media in a university, uh, is that we are always told to look at objective facts as opposed to subjective opinions. The first lesson of journalism is get the facts straight, right? But today, and then after some years, you may be able to offer an opinion on what is happening. This is the ground lesson of all journalism. Get the facts accurately, get them straight, and then move on to the next stage, if at all, because the great part of being a journalist is getting your facts right. And so I think this whole, why bias has become such an important factor is that because nobody is really engaging with facts. They are organizing these sessions of, bouting matches on television, and everybody screaming and shouting. There is very, very little engagement with facts in terms of choice of stories, in terms of structure of debates, in the line taken by the anchor. The anchor is there not to actually have a reasonable conversation, but to shout people down. And look, that it can be done differently. Of course, it can be done differently. Many of us switched on our CNN the other day because of what was happening on the US Capitol Hill. Certainly, the CNN is outraged, but they had other opinion from the other side. They had Republicans online who were also outraged. So they were able to have a very, very sensible debate in the midst of a great breaking story which had international audiences viewing in. We have reduced our television media, is just reached despicable. It's shameless. There are very, very few words I have left. It has very little engagement with news. It is only about bias. It's about propping up certain worldviews. I think I have certainly been part of the kind of thing that Nilima has just described, where you are sitting there, you are invited there only to be an oppositional side of it. And then you have completely inexperienced people being propped up to counter anything sensible that I might have to say because they don't want to hear that point of view. So I have basically, now I don't need, there was a point when I went, I have cut it down. I have cut down going to these kind of platforms. So that's the situation in my story. But I'm going to quickly hand over to my veteran colleague, Paranjoy, and after that, I'll bring Priya in. Paranjoy, over to you. Are we all biased, or are we all just standing there fighting for just some accurate, fact-based journalism out there? That's my question.
Well, thank you so much, Saba. Thank you, Nilima, and everybody else at Rate the Debate for having me on this program, and for the very flattering introduction that you've given me. But I want to just make one point at the outset. These words, unbiasedness or bias or objectivity, these are very, very difficult words. And philosophers over the ages, over centuries have tried to grapple with what is really truth, what is being fair, what is being unbiased. So I'm going to leave that for another occasion, but I'm going to make a simple point. None of us can ever hope to be unbiased. At the same time, we need to distinguish between facts or opinion. I mean, sometimes it's very clear, but we tend to blur that division. I said, okay, Saba, you're wearing a red jacket. Fact. Saba, I don't like your red jacket. Opinion. So it doesn't matter. We are very clear what is fact or what is opinion. But the problem is, bias is inevitable in every human being and every journalist in the manner in which, even when you're asked to report facts, it used to be there in the past. It's become even more important in this era of information overload that we are living in. So even when you are reporting a particular event or a particular a talk or something that has happened, what do you highlight first? What is your headline? What is the opening sentence? What do you leave out? What do you not highlight? What do you put at the end of your story? All these willy-nilly depend on, will indicate a certain bias. Now, I believe it's very important. And here I want to, a lesson I learned a long, long time ago, more than 43 years ago. My first editor was Bhabani Sengupta. He's no more, he passed away in 2011. But he said that none of us should ever flinch from acknowledging what our bias is. The question is, once we acknowledge our bias, then we shouldn't have any problem. So if I say I am biased against the corrupt, I am biased in favor of the underprivileged, I am biased in favor of those who don't have a voice. So I am very, very clear. If I am biased against corruption in high places, if I am biased against those who are abusing their power, their authority, I have no problem with that. And I say, yes, I'm biased because that's the way I look at my job. So to respond to what has happened, what is new today in the last few years, and this trend has got accelerated after the pandemic, is we find a very large section of the so-called mainstream media, traditional media. I mean, these are words, these are misnomers really. But there are certain television channels in particular who seem to be more keen on bashing the opposition and praising the government than vice versa. This is a complete sort of reversal of roles where the media is supposed to hold accountable those who are in positions of power. They're supposed to ask them difficult questions. Their job is to ensure there's greater transparency in public life. In fact, you say that you can make out whether a society, the character of a society, whether or not it's democratic, by the character of the media, by the headlines that you read. So if you're in North Korea, you're not going to find a single media outlet with anything critical of those in power. But if you go to countries where who believe in democracy, you won't find that. So your description of a society, a country, a nation as a democracy is contingent on how the media behaves, or how the media, to use the word, very, very famous words of Harold Evans, hold truth to power. So this is really the point that I want to begin with. And I want to say that unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, it's economic and commercial reasons, there's corporatization of the media, the dependence on advertising from the government, all of these have contributed to a situation where those who are critical of those who are in positions of power and authority, and I say this, I name names, I say this is something that we've seen over the last 6.5 years in the Narendra Modi government, that those who oppose the government is supposed to be, they get branded urban Naxalites. You and I are urban Naxalites, Saba. You know, we are Deshadrohis, we are traitors, we are guilty of sedition. And then I would say this branding of individuals who are critical of the regime, the present ruling regime, has been largely a consequence of what the media has been. The media has led the way in branding the critics of the government, those who are opposed to the government, as anti-nationals, traitors, Deshadrohis, Khan Market Gang, Tukre Gang, and so on and so forth. So I think that's something new that we are seeing, and it's unfortunate that we are seeing it. But on this whole issue of what is supposed to be a balance, false equivalence or not, I think I can hold forth on that for some time, but I think maybe...
I'll get Priya in first. Paranjoy, okay. That was a wonderful opening. So I just very, very quickly on this, Paranjoy has opened up. Look, I've been a journalist who covered the BJP for years. So one is completely, I would never have voted for them, but I had wonderful relationships with them. They have called me up after my book came out. Some of them thought there was a very accurate representation. All of this has happened. You know, so journalists, many of us who join the media do so because we are witnessing history. We cover political parties, we cover processes, we develop. So this whole, whereas the TV debate just boxes you in. Are you a Tukre gang? Are you a Muslim? Are you a hater or not a hater? Basically, it's that, you know. So, but at the end of it, in spite of all of this, Paranjoy, half of those guys who are these anchors, I mean, they have celebrity status, but they don't really have any respect, do they? I mean, they are more like cartoons from the world. I mean, that at least maybe it's something that nobody really beyond being these punch-up shows. They are cartoons. Anyway,
do you want me to?
Priya. I'll bring in.
React. I'll give you a very quick reaction.
Yeah.
I mean, the man who perhaps epitomizes this kind of behavior is Arnab Goswami. I mean, I've seen him over the last several years. I mean, I would say well over a decade. I mean, from when he used to work with the Telegraph to when he moved to NDTV, he was and then Times now, he was a different person. Today, you've used the right word. He has become a horrible caricature. And
yeah,
I mean, of what? I mean, and I'll say the same thing of a whole lot of other anchors, and I have no hesitation in naming them, though I appear on their programs. Thankfully, Mr. Arnab Goswami over the last 6 years hasn't asked me to appear on his program.
They still ask me. Unbelievable. I walked out in the middle of a show 2 years ago. They still call up because they're still looking for liberals. These poor guest relations guys, they're given the task. I feel they keep asking again and again and again. Woman, gender, Muslim, liberal. I mean, I tick a lot of boxes, so they never give up. They keep asking, So it's like that. Anyway, to get away from this, Priya is somebody who's been a traditional, she really knows politics. She's an insider. She writes excellent, informed stuff, and she's managed to have a little niche for herself, having a very, very sensible debate. So Priya, tell us how you've been able to pull it off, and what is, as somebody who's not gone over to the dark side, let me put it like that. I mean, how have you managed it? Please tell us your story. Huh?
Thank you, Saba. Thank you so much for all the kind words, and Nilima, and Read This Debate platform. I think today what we are discussing is really a very important, relevant topic, and I'm glad that people are actually talking about it. Let's bring it out of the cupboard. At least let's put it on the table and let's have a conversation. Because usually I find conversations like this also very rare, which kind of tells us about the kind of times that we are living in. 2 points I want to make. One is, of course, the larger question on how do we handle non-biased news coverage. At a point, Sabha, when truth is subjective. You cannot say when a girl has been raped, let's also give the other side of the murderers, or the rapists. There is one side. The girl has been raped and it is there on the table. I mean, Nilima talked about a lesson she learned from, an editor, her father. I also, I was these are things we pick up from the older guys. As we said, today's TV anchors are not people like you, me, Paranjoy, all of us, Nilima, who've actually been reporters on the ground first. Then we earned that right to have opinions, as you said, Saba. Opinions is something that comes after a lot of reporting and seeing. Now these anchors are kids who yesterday was sitting and just got the graduation degree, if at all. I mean, I'm questioning that also. And secondly, they are sitting here and they're giving opinions and passing judgments. They haven't been on the ground. They haven't done the work as most of us have. That's what entitles you for opinion. And I was there in a debate at the Hindu, I think, with N. Ram and Arun Shourie and myself. There are 3 of us are panelists. And of course, the Modi government is in power. This was a couple of years ago, very recently. And somebody from the audience got up, and we know where Arun Shourie stands, we know where N. Ram stands. And I was doing my best to be objective. But at some things, when are being discussed, you cannot be objective. You have to agree because they are right. And somebody from the audience got up and said, why is there no one from the other side? This is biased. This whole thing is fixed. To which N. Ram turned around and he said, look, I think this one-siderism is very lazy journalism, because if there is what I think is the truth, I will stand by it, and I'm not going to give the other side a view. Do you give the lie also 6 paras and give the truth also 6 paras? Then what kind of a journalism is that?
Wonderful, yeah. Yeah.
So that's really the problem that we are facing. I don't want to be biased, but at some things I have to take a stand. You and I, because the other side is taking such vociferous stance on something that we all know is not correct. So if we also keep quiet and play the objective, giving 4 panelists here and 4 panelists here, then we kind of lose the battle with the truth, for the truth rather. So that's the problem that we have. And we've seen the best of TV also. We began lockdown when I saw the best of TV, on the virus, on medicine, on how to counter the medicinal doctors, panelists, jobs, employment. We saw very rational, very sensible TV debates across all channels. When we came out of lockdown, what were TVs debating? Sushant Rajput. We saw the worst of TV debates, the best and the worst in the span of that 45 days or so, however long the lockdown was. We all saw both of that. That's how we can be good, but we are not. That is the real problem. And I just want to tell you a bit on the nuts and bolts of how debates are handled. They're not debates, Savai and Paranjoy, you're right. They are what I call verbal akhadas. The debate which saw Congress spokesperson Rajiv Tyagi, soon after that he had a heart attack when he had a particularly acrimonious exchange with Sambit Patra. I think he was called Jaychand or something. That program was called Dangal. These are what the program, they are also not saying debates. They are calling them what they are. They are not discussions. They are face-offs, they are khadas. Windows become punching bags. The more windows you have, the better it is. And in the appearance of objectivity, now the rules of debates are you get one Congress spokesperson or an opposition spokesperson, you get one from the government or the BJP side. And then you have 2 or 3 objective panelists, journalists hopefully, who will give, that's what makes a rational TV debate. And that is really the rule that I follow. What happens is, in the window and the labels, you will see the objective labels. You will say BJP, you will see Congress spokesperson, then you will see something called a political analyst. That person has not been a journalist. We've never seen him, but he is labeled political analyst to give the appearance of objectivity. And he's probably an out-of-work lawyer hoping for a Rajya Sabha seat at the end of this, his whole stint on TV. Or they are called, at the best, they will be called Congress supporter or BJP supporter. Then again, I must confess, the BJP is much better at this game than the Congress or the opposition. They have, and the RSS sends people. They have people called RSS supporter, which is, they're actually being honest. Most of the time, they will not even say they're RSS supporters. They will just say, I'm objective political analyst. So you will have a Congress spokesperson, BJP spokesperson, a political analyst who's clearly in favor of BJP, a BJP sympathizer, and a journalist who may or may not be in government side, and perhaps someone like, I think I will call all 3 of us on the other side of this. So that's what you and Paranjoy are facing, I guess, when you are told to quieten down and shut down, because that's exactly how debates are happening in maximum most of the channels. So this is something which I think, we as anchors and people who are who are setting up the debates, I'm not saying fixing because we don't fix debates, but there are debates that are fixed also. But this is exactly how a debate is fixed. And then, of course, we know about anchors who shout down people, who tone down the debates, who do all kinds of things. So those are all means at their disposal that are being used, but those are at least visible to the audience. But this is the invisible fixing that goes on, which you and I, some of us may know, but the average audience may not know that this guy is a political analyst and he's taking this line, dekho kya ho raha hai.
Yeah.
So that's the danger that really, So basically, I can answer more questions, but these are really the first thoughts.
No, that's very, very.
Can I add a few points?
Yeah.
Can I add a few points to what?
Priya said? But I'll pose a question to you, then you can add your points there also. They say, this is a slightly tricky one, so you'll have to answer it in concise time also. But this is that society gets what it deserves. Is it that these akhadas are more popular and that all of us are sort of not able to, how do we cross that? What do we do about that? The so-called thing that they are popular. And how do we deal with that? Please. Yeah.
Of course, we are supposed to vote our leaders, our elected representatives. It's very easy to say society deserves what it gets. But today, Indian society in particular, we've seen a large section of the population, 1/7 of the population, being demonized. I mean, Islamophobia is rampant and it's like so prevalent and so widespread. We have to go back 70 years or 80 years to find this kind of Islamophobia in Indian society. And I hold sections of the media largely responsible for this. So the whole idea is when you ask me a question as to why this is happening, I would say it is linked to the way the media is behaving. So our society is being increasingly shaped by the media, and therefore we find toxicity and poison having spread into the minds of people. I wanted to add a few points to what Priya said. Why is it so relatively easy to organize a television debate where you have, half a dozen or 8 or 10 people in little boxes and people shout and scream at each other? It's far less expensive to have that kind of a TV program than to spend money and send your reporters to different places, to meet different people, to interview different people, to have ground reports and field reports, right? So that one level is the economics of it. Second level is you convert news into some sort of an entertainment where people are screaming at each other. And this is supposed to be, this tutu meme kind of journalism is supposed to be highly entertaining. Saba, I recently was asked to write an opinion piece for a publication with which you would work for many years. And this is Salik Ahmed writing to his editor, Ruben Banerjee, with the title, "Dear Editor, I disagree with your both sides journalism." And I wrote a long comment on it because it raises a number of very, very important issues. And a similar issue was raised when an op-ed article by Tom Cotton, who was a Republican senator, who had argued that troops should be called out to quell demonstrations after the killing of African-American George Floyd. Now, both came in for a lot of criticism because at the end of the day, what are you doing? You are trying to pretend as if you're liberal. Therefore you're called or I'm called or somebody calls me. Is this the right to free expression, or this is a kind of attempt to appear as if you are neutral, which you're actually not? Let me explain. There's a phrase called false equivalence. False equivalence. It's like a logical fallacy. It's a very colloquial version of is don't compare apples with oranges. And there's also another word which is called tokenism. That you make a very superficial or a symbolic attempt to include a member of a minority community or a person who has a different point of view. And therefore, you pretend as I am giving a balance to an underrepresented section of the thing. Now, none of these actually at the end of the day are fool too many people all the time. So what I'm arguing, I agree entirely with what Priya has said and what you've been saying, that we have to understand why the media is doing this. And I here go back to the economics of it. At the end of the day, the media in India has become more dependent on government advertising than before. It was earlier also dependent. Because of the pandemic, the corporate sector, and there's been a complete corporatization of the media. So, some of the richest man in India is also a big media owner. So that's bound to happen. So what we are seeing, so the clout of the advertiser, the clout of Mr. Moneybags are all having a huge influence on what you watch and what you hear and what you get to read. So I just stop here.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Actually, if I just quickly come in, Saba, in fact, I had this discussion and Dilip Chering, in fact, came up with a very interesting suggestion. He's saying, we should have a ticker running by saying this channel is owned by XYZ. So at least you know where the opinions are coming from and where the so-called objectivity is coming from. Saba.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Priya. So, but Paranjoy, this whole thing about the Muslim thing, I think beyond just being chamchas of the government, I think we have now hit a new ideological segment in those who are now constitute the media. And I'm talking about particularly Hindi media now. Those who are employed in these little channels, they believe in the construction of dismantling the whole India and creating. Some of them, they actually believe, the people who are now getting jobs in desks and, of the television station. They have, as Priya pointed out, it's this new age. Now, having covered so many elections, I've noticed that the content of the most toxic communal content that the channels produce is then reproduced as a WhatsApp forward, which is then used for election. There are so many multiple levels. So this content is actually propaganda for a new nation formation. I think they are engaged in that for multiplicity of reasons. It's much more than just being chamchas of whatever regime is in power. Because look, till some years ago, Congress was in power. Did you see this kind of toxicity? No. And I'm not even saying that I don't like a particular ideology. I'm saying now we have hit something which we have not fully understood also, beyond money. They believe all this. They want to wipe out a lot of people. They believe, the people who are being employed by the channels are believers of this ideology also, whatever it is. And it is not fact-based. You know, we have to bring in the word post-truth. We have to see what happened in the US, the Proud Boys and everything. They believe in all of this. So this is what I feel, because I have examined how they produce different content for different districts. Let's say in Uttar Pradesh, which is all based on channel content. Some of it is local. So it's fascinating actually what's going on in the media, social media interface. So it's part of that also. But certainly it's not serving any standards of professional journalism by any standards, you know. So
Okay.
yeah. Who would like to come in and just before?
Let me react to some of the points that you made.
Yeah.
Okay. Saba, I agree with what you've said. But let me try and dig a little deeper to analyze why we are seeing what we have. Why do we see the demonization of 1/7 of the population who are Muslims? And yes, the bias is not just evident in the kind of people you recruit and who you don't recruit. I mean, perhaps the most egregious example of what is happening is what happened to Sudarshan TV. And that whole case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And at the end of the day, the government, given its ideological character, given the fact that it is part of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh's Hindu Rashtra project and Mr. Narendra Modi's, kind of the Congress Mukt Bharat and the Vipaksh Mukt Bharat, the opposition-free country. What was the difference between the Congress and the BJP or the UPA and the NDA? Nobody in power is really very, very tolerant towards critics. I mean, look at it this way. I mean, none of us are. When our parents told us, you don't do this, we didn't like it. I mean, it's only much later when we mature, we realize, they have our own good in mind, that this is what you call constructive criticism. They want your good. But wait, having said that, governments are never favorably inclined to their critics. But what is different is today the intolerance of those in power have gone not just brazen, they have become vindictive. I mean, look at the actions that have been taken against a Vinod Dua or a Siddharth Vardharajan. It could just be an FIR. I mean, look at the number of journalists in Uttar Pradesh alone who've been targeted through various means, through legal means, through, some of them have been threatened, some of them have been, look at the way what happened, and you're having a separate session on this, the way the whole Hathras episode was, the individuals who covered, who reported on it, how they were targeted. So that, I think, is the key change that has happened. From being intolerant, you're having a regime which is vindictive. And I do believe that the Prime Minister has to take his share of the responsibility. He picks and chooses the journalists he chooses to give interviews with. Fine. Except that they don't ask him tough questions. They don't ask him follow-up questions, say whether it be demonetization or the lockdown or whatever. So in a sense, Mr. Narendra Modi is the first Prime Minister of India who's never addressed a spontaneous, unscripted press conference where a media conference where anybody can ask him anything. So this is, so the culture of subservience has started right at the top and it's now spread across the entire country. Unfortunate, but true.
But Saba, if I can come in.
Yeah, please do, Priya, come.
A couple of things, yes, of course, I totally agree that the media is really very, not fighting back, and there is a lot of targeting of the media also. But this is something that happened earlier also, let's, in the interest of objectivity, whatever, this is not, it's just more evident now because of social media, because people are talking more. You think postings and this thing was not done to favor a certain government point of view. Politicians didn't call up people. I'll tell you the difference between then and now, having worked under then. In the Congress regime, what used to happen was if someone had a problem with your story, it was usually about themselves. Nobody had a problem. You could say anything you want to against Ten Janpath, against Rahul Gandhi, against these guys would not call up. There was no reaction. They believed in this whole mystique of silence. But if you were to write against a Kapil Sibal, a Chidambaram, a Anand Sharma, Jairam Ramesh, calls, even a Subhi member for a story are done. So they would call a for institutionalized, because I think none of the cabinet ministers have any heft. So they will call.
I'm unable to hear Priya. I think
Yeah, I think Priya's internet is giving some trouble. Yeah. So I think till Priya's, can I be heard? Priya, your internet was giving a trouble, so we lost you. You were making a very interesting point. I don't think she can hear. So, okay. So we had a glitch. Can you guys hear me? I mean, am I clear? I hope it's not at my end. Okay. I think Priya is absolutely right, because I actually have some stories about that. And I wouldn't like to, someday I will tell the people in the Congress who complained and how they complained, you know, with Vinod Mehta. I mean, actually it was the reverse. One was a very powerful minister who, whatever, I mean, it was almost a threat. And I think some people here would know who I'm talking about. Very, very powerful, held a lot of portfolios. The son of that person almost gave a threat. So on behalf of a cover story I had done. The other was a very sweet. It was a story against Sonia Gandhi, a cover story in Outlook. And I will say.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. So Priya, I was just filling in. So
I heard you. I could hear you.
So it was very, so Suman Dubey, God bless him, came to the office. He met Vinod Mehta, the late editor, and he said, she can write about anyone she likes. Why did she have to write a story critical of Sonia ji? Vinod called me and said, keep doing whatever it is you're doing. At that time, I was a political editor, though my primary thing was to cover the BJP. When there was a shortfall, I could cover everything, right? So this is what happened. So with Congress also, one has had issues. Priya, you made a very, very good point. You know, so if you'd like to add, we have 2 minutes before I have to start pushing the audience questions. You know, so Priya, you want to finish that point? Absolutely. I think that's a very important point to have made. Yeah.
Yeah. And
again, your voice is going. I think.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better. Yeah.
I think because of social media, what is happening is that people are now becoming more aware, and there is, of course, a whole lot of to and fro happening. Hence, what this government is doing is coming to aware. The second thing I want to write is also the kind of debates that are there. It is easier to say not debate the economy, but debate the CAA, or to debate, something like as we saw Sushant Singh Rajput case. Why go in for debates to try and distract? So media has also been used. It's not just what we are talking, but what we are not also talking. That's also important.
Yes, and I think distraction is a very, very important. It's always been that way. The BJP has been very good with media management. Today also
maintain the narrative. Yeah.
They know that how to shift the story. I know on occasions when it's been decided, now we will bring in another big story so that doesn't get attention. They're very good with that. Even today, I think
we're not discussing China. We're not discussing the economy. What are we discussing? The farmers. How many channels have covered the farmers?
Yeah, they haven't. But today they have produced 3 other stories already, because there's this word Supreme Court thing which I haven't. They produced. I think the army chief has said there is a threat from China and Pakistan, which of course, we've had all the channels covering the Prime Minister's speech this morning, with a few notable exceptions. We already have 3 distractions. And I'm sure they'll find some violence in Bengal to throw into the mix, and there will be something like that. And COVID vaccine, even the best channels are reporting on the arrival of the COVID vaccine as if it's the army troops are landing in India.
No, but the same PM guy in search of COVID vaccine. Is he going to find the Sanjeevani booty? Is he running? He's just going to the centers that were producing the COVID vaccine. But the headlines was PM ja rahe hai search for the COVID vaccine.
Exactly. As if the Prime Minister
is going to bring he's not a Hanuman who's going to carry the booty and bring it.
Yeah, it's absolutely like that. So, I have to, I'm getting messages. I have to, I don't think Nilima is going to give us time, because she's got 2 other panels back to back. So this is becoming fun now. So I'm going to start opening up the questions. So the first one is for Priya. Priya, you mentioned about the invisible fixing. How does it fit into the domain of media and replaces the originality of the field? And this is by this I can't make out the person. Is it by Dali? No, this is by whatever. Priya, go ahead.
So see, this fixing in terms of how it for the viewer, it gives a very like a try and objective picture that we have one BJP person, one Congress, and here are the other political analysts who are going to give their objective point of view and who are going to be during the course of the debate swayed in favor of the BJP or whichever party. And I'm sorry, again, I'm saying it, the RSS and the BJP are much better. Even if you do get that odd Congress sympathizer, he will most probably be talking rubbish. In fact, I have a list of those names. I'm going to do a story on these guys who come out as Congress sympathizers, and they are actually harming the party more than helping them. So maybe they're also being sent by the RSS. I have no idea. But the RSS BJP guys are much better. They are better planned. They come with points. They come with debates. And you say, okay, this is an objective person, but look at him. He is making this point of view. Let me not listen to the BJP guy because he's obviously a BJP person. But even an objective person is taking the BJP guy's side. So this is how you tend to sway opinion, I think, and kind of fix the debate, as they say.
Yeah, okay. For Paranjoy, there's a question. Paranjoy, you are saying that we should accept our biases. But then in doing so, don't we get tagged to a particular ideology?
So what? I mean, so long as you are clear. I mean, we might be reporters, but we still vote for one party or the other, one candidate or the other. So, this whole myth about being quote unquote unbiased, I go back to where I started. None of us are and can ever be. I mean, let's be clear about our biases. If to say I'm a leftist, to say I have concern for the poor and the underprivileged and those who are oppressed, fine, then call me a leftist. Now, it doesn't matter to me how you brand it. As so long as I am clear what my biases are. And I said, okay, I am biased against cronyism. I am biased against corruption. So does that make me what? A leftist? A rightist? So I think these terms that are used are of little use. At the end of the day, are you clear? Are you a journalist first, or are you working for an advertising agency? Are you a journalist first, or are you a public relations officer, a PRO of somebody? And Saba, you related quite a few anecdotes. Let me also relate one of my favorite anecdotes. Once my friend Navika Kumar described me as belonging to the Lutyens lobby, the Khan Market gang. So I said, thank you, Navika, and let me then describe you as an excellent PRO of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And then she said, how can you say that? So I said, how can you say what you said to me? So we can have this little light banter, but on a more serious note, I think the change that we are talking about is that it's not that fixing wasn't happening in the past. It's not as if the Congress leaders, and I can share with you quite a few experiences off the record of how Congress persons will call up your boss, will call up your owner and say, oh, stop this guy or don't go on with this guy. But the level, how vindictive the present regime has been towards its political, not just its political opponents, its critics in the media is perhaps unique. And the only comparison is that Indira Gandhi put all her critics, including journalists, behind bars, but the emergency lasted for, from June 1975 to January.
But it was there on the table that there is an emergency. It was not disguised as something else.
Indira Gandhi said, put them behind bars. I mean, to use Mr. M.G. Devasayam's view, it was like a jhatka. What has actually happened is a halal technique that is being used. Saba will understand what I say better than others. It's like death by 1,000 cuts.
We all understand, Paranjoy.
You think I'm going to go and halal a chicken during birth? Anyway, Paranjoy, I'm joking. I'm just trying to make it a little lighter. But we have many questions. A lot of them are to do with the bias. One question, how do we, very quickly, little time, what do we do about it? We need very sort of one-line answers right now at this point. Priya, over to you first. Precisely, what can we, the three of us, Nilima, the audience, to go ahead, what are the actual things we can do about this? Is there
call out the biases? We'll have to just be more vigilant. And in terms of, I would actually even call up the most fundamentalist, the most say, for want of a better word, the one who's spreading the maximum lies, and actually confront him, nail the lie. Basically, that's the only one we can really go on with biases. Have shows, and this in terms of bias, also define bias. I think it's we have to figure out which side is truth or not, because there's so many shades of gray really on it. But we've seen that which side is not getting its own voice. I think that's the side that one should try and give a voice to.
To add to what Priya said, at the end of the day, your average, your so-called viewer or listener or reader, she or he has to understand that what is put out on WhatsApp is not the truth. I mean, even if there's an entire generation being educated in WhatsApp University, to use Ravish Kumar's phrase, we must also keep in mind that the social media is used today to put out some of the most hate-filled and most toxic messages. Now, if you start believing them, then you are not just uneducated, unaware, you have fallen into the trap of those who are spreading these hateful messages. So greater awareness, and yes, what Priya said, call them out, and tell your reader, tell your viewer, tell your listener, you can't, if you get everything free or you expect everything free, you'll also get a lot of fake information and trash information. So learn to support independent media, learn to, if required, pay for quality information, well-researched information. And if you don't, then you're going to get more and more trash.
So I think we are just running out of time, and I just saw Prateek Sinha pop up there. So I think you'll get a lecture on fake news and checking all of that. So I'm not even going to go there. I'm just going to wind this up by saying a couple of things, what we can do, what I have personally found. Since Paranjoy, the kind of toxicity that you speak about is really hit at me because of whatever, the so-called identity, that people try and link. But the point, and also because I have been a visible face, so they don't, how is this woman there? The kind of an ad. I found that I have decided to switch off and ignore them. I never make the story. I'm getting back to one journalism creed. Don't make it about us. We are journalists to write about other people, to tell the stories about other people. I think many of us are forgetting that, this social media driven age is making it about, it's not about us. We are there tasked with covering other people. So I think if we get back to that, we stick to the basis of facts, and it's very easy to spot the lies. It's not difficult. It's good when you have professional platforms such as Alt News and all dedicated to that. But so we are all full of biases. We are all products of our backgrounds, our upbringing, our belief systems, our social choices that we make, our political choices. But at the very least, I think all three of us know what is a fact. When we talk about facts, yes, I agree, we can prioritize certain facts. But for 2 decades, what was the facts I was reporting on? It is what did the BJP say today? What is happening there? So we're all professionals. Professionals are capable of putting their biases aside and doing the job at hand and doing it well. It is still a privilege for all the problems to be a journalist. We are witnesses to history, and we have one of the most interesting professions around, and we are tasked with sort of watching it, and as Priya has said, calling it out and recognizing what is happening. Paranjoy, as you are always so insightful, and thank you so much, Nilima, for creating this platform for all of us. I think we could have gone on, but I saw Mrinalji's face pop up, I saw Prateek's face pop up, and I saw Ashutosh. So we have to cede space to people, stalwarts and extremely important figures, and Prateek Sinha, outstanding work. We have to cede space to all of that. So thank you so much. I wish I could have gotten more questions, but it just became impossible.
It's a fascinating session. Thank you so much, all of you, Saba, Paranjoy, Priya. I totally agree. It's a privilege to be a journalist. It's a special marker of freedom of democracy. I think the only bias one should have is the bias towards those people who do not have a voice. I think that's the only bias we all should identify and follow. Thank you very much. And also thank you so much for your support for Rate the Debate. As I said, we are the only content ranking system in the country. We are exactly doing what some of the concerns which you have expressed here are. Thank you very much. Do
Thank
keep, continue, because we have a wonderful session with Narendranath ji, Mrinal ji, Ashutosh ji, and Pratik Sinha. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.